好，欢迎大家来到在美教育本科规划第4届嘉年华的直播现场。我们的直播将在 Zoom、微信、小红书平台上同步进行。从上周开始，InAmerica 的顾问、学生和家长陆续跟大家探讨了每本申请的各类热门话题，观众们的热情不减，积极的都在为我们点赞和转发。那今天呢，我们也会邀请到2位常春藤名校的教授，与大家分享有关科研的话题。为了在有限的时间内更多的分享嘉宾的讲话，同时保证研讨会的流畅性，我们本场讲座不设人工翻译。我们的视频下方有实时的中英文字幕翻译，大家可以参考，更好的观看本场讲座。那好，我们的研讨会就正式开始。我是在美教育的本科规划和背景提升顾问冲，我毕业于哥伦比亚大学，有20多年的教育教学和管理经验。那今天参与我们的直播嘉宾呢，有2位，一位是来自达特茅斯的 Clark 教授，当前研究领域包括消费者行为与神经科学、消费者决策等。他成功的指导了多项研究计划来解释和策划，预测客户的行为。服务的著名企业及政府部门包括有可口可乐、麦当劳、美国广告研究基金会、美国邮政管理局。第2位嘉宾呢是来自哥伦比亚大学的 Blumberg 教授，他的研究兴趣包括代数拓扑和拓扑数据分析、计算机安全与隐私、几何和拓扑在基因组数据分析中的应用。Blumberg 教授同时也在哥伦比亚大学赫伯特和 Florence 欧文癌症中数据研究教授，专注于数学在医学中的运用研究。那 STEM 和医学相关的科研一直都是我们科研的热门方向。我们今天将与2位教授来共同探讨相关的一些话题。本场会议我们将从以下几个方面展开：教授的研究方向和做过的项目，参与者需要具备的特质，科研的收获， STEM 和医学研究的新兴趋势和挑战。Okay, it's truly an honor to have both of you here today. STEM and medical related research projects have long been popular and are also known for being particularly challenging. To help our audience gain a deeper understanding of research in these areas, we would greatly appreciate it if you could share your perspectives on a few key points. And to start, could you please describe your primary research areas and share some of your insights from your experiences in these fields? So, Professor Clark, could you share first?
Sure. So hi, everyone. So I am a decision
Professor
neuroscientist.
Clark, you are probably muted. We couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You can?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, wonderful. So I am a decision neuroscientist. I teach and conduct research at Dartmouth College's Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences. And my primary research focuses on understanding how climate and energy communications are processed by different groups of individuals. And our goal is to understand how to create targeted messaging that resonates across people in the same way, though its framing might be different depending on the group. And our ultimate goal is to reduce the intention action gap that exists in saying that we'll engage in sustainable actions, but not actually doing so.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, Professor Blumberg, could you also share your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I work in the mathematics and computer science departments at Columbia, and also through the Irving Institute for Cancer Dynamics. And in terms of biomedical research and genomics, what I'm primarily interested in is what's called geometric data analysis. And the idea here is that we have a great deal now of genomic data, which is measurements for each cell. You take a tissue sample, so I take a slice out of a tumor or an organ or something like that, and then for each cell in that piece of tissue, I get a collection of numbers which represent one for each gene, which represent the amount of what's called messenger RNA. And what that's a proxy for is how much protein there is coded for that gene, and that's more or less some notion of what the cell is doing. And so I have these sort of points in space in terms of what the cell is doing to describe what the cell is doing, and then the general idea is that the shape of that should, and in some high dimensional sense, should tell you something about thinking about scientific and clinical inference. So you hope that the shape of diseased cells is different in this expression space, is different from the shape of healthy cells. And that's the kind of, at a very high level, that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in.
Okay, thank you so much. And we've successfully worked together on research projects for several years, and it's been very rewarding journey. So would each of you be willing to share one case study from your experience? Specifically, what topics or problems did your case focus on, and what were the key highlights and breakthroughs of this study? Professor Blumberg? This time, would you share first?
Sure. Yeah, so let's see. You know, a lot of the projects that I've supervised have been along the lines of what I just described in terms of analyzing these point clouds of data. One recent project, one of the problems with this kind of data is that it's noisy. It's measured on physical implements. There's lots of noise, and we don't understand the noise very well. We don't have systematic models of what the noise is. But there are mathematical results that let you, in some circumstances, try to sort of subtract off the noise, even in cases where you don't really understand that much about it because of some version of the central limit theorem, which tells you that something about what happens kind of if you roll lots and lots and lots of dice and you start averaging, even if you don't understand the dice very well, in the limit you sort of can understand things. And so the student explored this and learned how this all worked, and then sort of improved existing algorithms by thinking about ways to approximate them. So the existing algorithms are very expensive computationally, and there are limits on how large a data set one could use. And one of the things the student worked on was, what can you do if you're going to try to find some way of using only a small part of the data set to try to approximate this whole thing. And he figured out a nice way to do it,
Mhm.
and and wrote it up. So it was a very successful project.
Okay, great. Thanks. So Professor Clark?
Sure. So I've done a number of projects that sort of span student interests. I try to start with what the students are interested in and then build in a program that integrates behavioral science, neuroscience, psychology into their work. And one project was looking at the perceptions of healthy and unhealthy brand logos on objectively healthy and unhealthy foods. Another was working on understanding how feelings of warm glow physiologically have responses that are associated with causal impacts on intention to engage in high-cost sustainable outcomes. And there's also another student that I worked with who was interested in creating an app to gamify a solution for a mobile device to start to reduce the desire to gamble. So we integrated some psychonomics in there as well. And another student that I recently worked with used a novel app that is built in on the iPhone and on Apple Watch to create cues to understand what phase of last stage of REM cycle sleep is occurring, and then to play cues during that time to influence their dreams. And the last student that comes to mind was looking at differences in age groups and the receptivity of individuals by talking to a therapeutic chatbot versus an actual human. So those are some kind of wide-ranging but very interesting projects.
Yes, that's very interesting. Okay. Yeah. So the research projects that you just described sounds very interesting, but also very challenges. So I think so each of year, many students apply for the opportunities to work with you on the research projects. So what is specific like a qualities do you typically look for in a student who express their interest? And in your experience, what characteristics signal strong potential for innovative and very competitive work? Yeah, Professor Clark, please.
Sure. So I start with, again, the student's passion, but I also think about the current relevance of their research question to society. What groups are they trying to impact? I understand what, the feasibility and, is the student's question and research design something that is reasonable with everything else that's going on in schedules, because sometimes there's like scope creep, right? And so we have to keep a very conservative but elegant studies. And I also look to see what the student's background experience is, and what research capacities that they have in terms of not only their time but the resources to find individuals to query.
Mhm. Okay, sounds good. Professor Blumberg,
Yeah.
so
So
you see a student, so what are qualities you're looking for?
yeah. So the biggest thing that I look for is students who are technically fairly fearless in the sense that there's lots of stuff to learn to get up to speed in doing genomic research, and none of it is that hard. And I don't mean it's easy in the you sit down in 10 minutes you understand it, but like none of it is stuff that a bright and motivated high school student couldn't learn. But you have to be willing to dive into stuff you don't know and play with it and get stuck and get unstuck. And that's the sort of thing I look for more than anything else in terms of what determines which students will succeed in completing these research projects. I mean, th those are qualities, honestly, like I sit on the admissions committee at Columbia, and those are qualities we look for very generically, like being able to take on challenges and deal with setbacks and push through things. It's a good life quality, but certainly in terms of these research projects, it's essential.
Yeah, based on what it describes in both of your research projects, yeah, it sounds very like a technical, and I assume they like require some like basic technical skills. So, do you think like as high school schoolers can be qualified for these projects? Yeah, each of you, could you share some of your perspectives on this?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that a high school student completely has the capacity to get through this, and I definitely agree as well with Andrew. Uh, Coming in with some basic understanding of literature searches, if there's any type of statistical background that they have at all. But I think that working with these actual projects takes research and brings it from something that's very abstract into something very concrete that they're actually doing and learning as they go, and developing a number of skills.
Yeah, I've had both through my association with you and otherwise have supervised lots of high school students, and my experience has been that high school students with a certain amount of mathematical maturity and some familiarity with programming don't have any problem,
Oh,
again, provided that they're motivated, don't have any problem coming up to speed to do something interesting.
okay.
Mathematical
So
maturity is a sort of loosely defined concept, but I just mean that there's no specific subject. You just need to be willing to learn stuff.
okay, that's a could be a relief for most of the high school students. Okay, let's go to our next topic. So, most of the time, students are who are willing to commit significant time to research projects are those who are aiming to apply to the top colleges. So they hope to gain experiences, not just only to enhance their college applications, but also contribute to their long-term academic and professional success. So in your view, what are the key technical and analytical skills that students can expect to develop through participation in research projects? And additionally, how do these research experiences can enhance their problem-solving abilities and critical thinking in the real-world context? Professor Clark, would you please
Sure.
take it first?
Sure. So there are so many different skills that these projects allow students to develop, from understanding how to conduct a research study, understanding different kinds of research designs, looking up quality literature and understanding what makes good research versus not, because there's a lot of different spans of quality research out there, and it's a really important skill to determine what's good and not so great research. There's also the opportunity for some really concrete understanding of statistics, actually with working with either primary data sets that the student collects themselves, or there's an array of data sets online that they can pull and make novel comparisons across different data sets. Also, time management is huge because, again, the student is balancing so many things, and to learn to build in this project is really a critical skill. And also scientific writing. It's not something that is secondhand nature. You have to learn to write as a scientist, and that allows practice when doing these kinds of projects. And I think, with respect to this research experience and how it contributes to problem-solving abilities and critical thinking in real-world settings, I would say that having first to think about the relevance of the issue to the larger society, the student is taking basic research, peer-reviewed research, and then considering ways of how to apply it in future directions for potential applications in society. So I think that that's really a critical skill as well.
Yeah, Professor Blumberg.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo the general characteristics that that Kimberly mentioned. In addition, the thing that beyond the sort of specific technical stuff, like learning to use some of the genomics packages and something about linear algebra and statistics and things like this, and something about technical writing, the big thing that I want the students to gain is that the students tend to operate as micro versions of how they would operate as if they were a graduate student in my group, and I want them to get some sense of what it means to actually do science. And doing productive science is a lot of the time is frustrating and grungy and unpleasant, and uh, requires various sorts of personal characteristics having to do with dealing with frustration. Um, and then also those moments when you discover something. And so that's the thing that I want the students to feel and get out of it, because that the specific technical skills, if you continue in biomedical research, that's great. But if you don't, you won't remember them in 2 years. Not really, but you will remember the feeling of what it was like to figure something out and what it was like to work on your own on something hard and things like this. And again, that will serve you well, whatever you do with your life, even if you decide to do some other kind of quantitative field or something even broader.
Okay, great. Yes, so students can get a lot of skills and knowledges from the projects that you just shared. And do you think if they apply for some majors is different with what the project they have done? So do you think that still can be, the abilities can still transfer to those majors they're going to?
Absolutely. The research design, all of it transfers. And you have a general understanding of how to conduct research, how to design a research study, understanding the power analysis, for example. And also the writing skills are transferable. A basic understanding of statistics can be built on. We use statistics in all research, across disciplines. So there's a lot there that is able to be used as a solid foundation wherever the student chooses to move in their professional pursuits.
Yeah, Professor. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I said a little bit about this in the last answer, but yes, I think that these skills are widely transferable.
好，那很明显哈，那我们刚才两位教授也介绍了，其实参加了我们的这个科研项目的同学呢，也不用担心，就是你现在去选择的这样一些科研项目，可能跟你未来的这个申请的方向不一定是同一个专业的。但是呢，在这个科研项目当中，因为大家可以锻炼自己的很多能力，比如说数据分析能力、统计学的能力，然后还有如何写这个学术论文的能力。那这些呢，都是在你未来的这个大学申请阶段，或者是已经上了大学阶段，以及到后来你已经上班了的阶段，可能都是有这个帮助的。Let's move to the next. Okay, so STEM and medical research are constantly evolving, especially as our world continues to experience rapid and significant changes. So, could you share your perspectives on some of the emerging trends that are currently shaping the landscape of the STEM and medical research? And in your opinion, what are the major challenges or obstacles researchers in these fields are facing today? It could be like a regulatory hurdles, ethical concerns, or technical limitations.
So,
Well, I would say, oh, go ahead.
no, you can start.
Okay, so I would say that AI, integrating data streams that we collect from our brain and body into predictive models is definitely something that is on the rise in terms of cutting edge tailored pharmaceutical solutions. So utilizing and understanding how an individual's either electrical scalp conductance, the signals there from EEG, or metabolic changes in activation in different brain structures change as a function of, say, a certain antidepressant can then help to predict other new individuals and whether or not they will be receptive to a certain antidepressant, for example, that works on a certain neurotransmitter versus another, which is going to help save a lot in terms of insurance and things like, if somebody has depression, for example, if they get the wrong medication, they're very unlikely to go back and seek other treatment. And so this was really going to streamline and tailor pharmaceutical solutions for the people that need them. And for my own research here at Dartmouth, what I do is integrate real-time brain and body responses to climate and energy communications. And then we integrate things like different dependent measures from our eye tracking, our biometric responses, our scalp conductance into predictive models to determine whether or not we can understand things like someone's political ideology. So I think that that's been really interesting. And in terms of some of the major challenges or obstacles that in terms of regulations and so forth, our federal government has just reduced some types of grant funding. The medical community is less impacted, though, than other fields. So I would say that that's a huge change here, and it's an ongoing uncertainty for a lot of academics in terms of continued grant funding. So it's kind of a stay tuned and stay frosty and wait to see what outcomes happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Professor Blumberg, please.
Sure. I mean, the big thing, there's sort of continued technical progress in measurement. And so the kinds of data that we have and its resolution continues to improve. So the model I described at the beginning was something like you take tissue and you put it in a blender. And when you do that, you lose all spatial structure. You can try to reconstruct some sort of notion of shape in function space, but the spatial structure that you had originally is gone. And there are now technologies that don't do that. This is called spatial transcriptomics. And so there's lots of stuff like that happening. But the big thing that really drives the challenges, and in some sense, this hasn't changed a great deal in the last God knows how long, is that it's very hard to do causal inference. And so it's very easy. There's been a lot of success in stuff like people got Nobel Prizes for discovering that there are particular genes that if you turn them off or turn them on, someone will get cancer. And this is notable in breast cancers, for instance. And that's great. But most disease progressions are not the result of a single gene, but of some sort of complicated genomic program. And we still don't really understand how to get at that kind of thing systematically, how to collect the data you need for it, and how to analyze it. And one of the other challenges is that, particularly in some of this kind of clinical work, is that each sample is a patient, and there just aren't that many of them. And getting the data samples often takes a lot of time, and it's conducted at different hospitals all over the country or all over the world. As part of one project, I flew to Korea in order to help broker a collaboration with a surgeon at Samsung National Hospital in Seoul, because that's where all of the people who had a certain kind of cancer were treated in Korea. And so this kind of stuff makes it challenging because it means that despite all the talk about big data, lots of the data sets we use are much smaller than you would like. And that makes it hard to do anything. So those I think are the kinds of challenges.
Okay, great. So the last questions about this topic is how have recent global events or technological advancements influenced your work or research approach?
So for me, the understanding and working with earth scientists as well as computer scientists to see the extent to which the novel measures of brain and body that we collect data from during our research studies, how it can be used to increase the predictive efficacy of models about decision making related to behaving sustainably. And then, for the global events that also have influenced, I think it's an important moment to say that our government has reduced some grants, and there are reduced support also for areas of like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and climate change research. And so as a scientist, it's really critical, it's a critical skill to learn to pivot the language about your research so that it is in line with the current political funding ideologies. And so, for example, my climate communications research has been more focused now on energy communications, right? And so learning how to pivot when you need to is an important skill.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add about technological advances, and honestly, I'm not sure that I can identify recent global events that have had particular specific impact on genomics other than the sort of generic background impact they have on everybody.
OK，那刚才呢，两位教授都介绍了他们所在的领域。那现在的这样一些，不管是从政策上还是技术上，对于这些领域的影响。当然，在任何的这个科研项目里面，我们都会是有挑战，都会是有这个困难的。但是没有关系哈，大家只要是跟着教授的这样一个这个指导，那大家都可以去克服这样的困难。Thank you so much for sharing your insight perspectives on these important topics. So before our Q&A session today, so what advice would you offer to young people who are interested in pursuing a STEM or medical research?
I would say take a statistics course as soon as you can, because it's fundamental. And as I mentioned before, it's broadly applicable to research in general. Try to take a machine learning course to familiarize yourself with what's out there in terms of predictive modeling, because that's only going to be a focus of increased utility. Also think about taking a course on research methods to understand that there are fundamental differences in research designs, and knowing which research designs to use when is a really critical skill. And I would say if you have the ability to do so, go on LinkedIn and find groups that you have relevant interests to you, and follow their posts and learn their language, how they talk about their field. And when they post on LinkedIn, they're talking about the latest topic. So that's a way to keep present and really start to learn from leaders in fields. And then I would say, follow your passion. Try to take one of your interests and determine how much you can integrate it into like STEM or health or medical research. And I would say that's my advice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would say, just from a technical point of view, learn as much as you can about statistics and elementary probability and programming, preferably in Python. And if you can get there, some linear algebra. Calculus is actually less important. Calculus is great, but in terms of specific technical areas, don't be fooled by emerging rhetoric that because of AI, you don't need to learn to program. You need to learn to program. And these tools are great, and they will change the practice of engineering. There is no doubt you will use them in your daily life, I expect, when you are older. They don't eliminate the need to learn the kinds of things you learn by doing this. And so they're not, and they are not currently, and I think for a long time won't be at a level where they are more than enhancements for someone skilled. So, I could say more about that, but the short answer is don't turn over your exercising the technical parts of your brain to machines.
Thank you so much for sharing. 那刚才呢，两位教授也给我们所有的年轻人一些新的这个忠告哈。那如果你是对这个科研项目感兴趣的同学呢，那其实有很多的这个事情，你可以在科研之前你就可以做。那比如说，你可以去学习一些关于统计学的知识，然后呢，其实比如说 Blumberg 教授刚才就是建议大家去学一些编程的这样一些课程，因为这个的确是在今后所有的不管是科研项目还是其他的项目当中都是非常有用的，一直要去跟随这个科技的发展。那刚才 Clark 教授也提到了，那其实呢，除了去学一些课程以外呢，我们还可以运用一些社交软件。那比如说 LinkedIn 啊，去看一看这个行业中的这个专业人士他们的一些这个在社交媒体上的一些发表他们的观点啊，或者一些行业的新兴动态啊，这些都是同学们可以去学习，可以去 follow 的。好，那科研呢，一直以来都是我们学生在大学申请中极具价值的重要背景提升项目，不仅可以向大学充分的展示自身的科研能力与学术的兴趣，更能在整个过程当中锻炼批判性思维、问题解决等方面的综合素养。那这些能力呢，对于未来的大学学习以及职业的发展都有非常深远的影响。那每年参加我们科研项目的同学都能取得非常令人振奋的成果。那比如说，今年目前为止，我们的学生就仅仅只是参与了我们这个科研项目的同学呢，就斩获了50多份来自于比如说普林斯顿大学、哈佛大学。斯坦福大学、宾夕法尼亚大学、哥伦比亚大学、杜克大学等顶尖学府的录取通知书。Now let's take a look at like what questions we have from the audience today. I'll stop sharing.
Hi, Chung. The questions are in the chat room.
Okay, yeah.
I've got 3 questions. Yeah, you can
Yes.
check that.
Okay, let's see what questions we have from here. Question 1, can 9th grade students participate in research projects, or is it only possible after 11th grade? Yeah, I think this is very popular questions that the parents very interested in. Professor Clark, would you like to share your opinion?
Yeah, so I've worked with 9th graders before, and it's very much up to, how much time they have. And do they have, what type of experience do they have? Do they have a question that could be integrated into a research design? Are they interested in primary or secondary research? So I think it's a case by case basis, but it's not something that is not possible, right? For a 9th grader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 那其实我在okay. Professor Blumberg, would you like to share?
Sure. Yeah, I've had 9th grade students before. It's fine. They have to do more background work and typically start further back from the frontier. But if the student is motivated, that's not a problem.
好，那其实呢，刚才教授们也谈到了哈，其实对于这个到底是9年级还是11年级的同学来参与到这个科研项目呢，其实还是根据个人这个来决定的。因为比如说像我自己也是一样的，我也有的学生可能也9年级的时候他就去参与一个科研项目，那同时他也非常能够展现他这个非常好的，比如说我们刚刚提到的统计学的能力呀。还有数据分析的这样一些能力，那他就能非常好的 handle 这个科研项目。那当然11年级的同学，那也是我们参与科研项目最多的同学。但是在这个时候，我们也知道啊，同学们很多的时间都要用在，比如说他最后一年的这个senior year 的这个GPA 也非常的重要，junior year 的 GPA 也非常的重要。然后呢，他可能有的同学还要考 SAT，所以时间上其实在这一年是非常非常的有限的。那么又要拿出时间来参加科研，其实是这一年会非常的充实哈。但是不管是9年级还是11年级，其实都是适合我们的学生来参与的。但是不管是什么年级参与，都需要大家花很多的时间和精力去准备，去在这个过程当中去一步一步的跟着我们的教授去完成。Let's see the question 2. If one chooses to engage in research but doesn't end up finishing a paper, does that mean it won't be useful for their college application? That's a very interesting question.
So just to answer that, I would say that actually the papers are, having been on the other side of this, are not that useful for college applications. That the most useful part is the experience of it, and if possible, the reference letter from the mentor. The actual research, high school students don't do typically original research that's significant, and the journals one publishes in are not ones necessarily that you would as a older person. And so the specifics of the paper often are not that important. I mean, this is not to say that you shouldn't do the paper. The experience of doing it is really important, but the actual output product and whether or not you did it is often not tremendously important. So I wouldn't let that be a deterrent.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree. And I would say that, having a paper is a good idea. And what I've seen in the trend, which is kind of unbelievable to me, but it's happening, there are now more peer-reviewed journals that are focused on high school students to give them a space to have a peer-reviewed opportunity. There are some journals that are not, as careful, but I think having that research experience is really important because it ends up being a talking point in an interview. You have something to say that's significant, and it shows that you have motivation as a high school student to take the initiative to participate in research.
Thank you so much. Yeah，那其实呢，到底你这个完不完成这个论文哈？当然，完成论文是更好的，但是最重要的呢，还是在这个科研项目当中呢，你能展现你自己对这个科研项目的这样一个浓厚的兴趣，你想花这个额外的时间来做这样一个科研。然后，另外就是你在科研当中，所展现出来的你的这个韧劲儿，你的这个学习能力。那因为这个之后，教授会给你写一封非常 strong 的这个推荐信，这个其实是在这个大学申请阶段是非常非常重要的。Okay, probably we just have time for this lesser question. My child likes biology but doesn't have a specific topic of interest. How can they find a research topic to work on?
So I would
Mhm.
I would just say start learning more about the subdivisions within biology and see if there is something a little more specific than the general field of biology. There's, what topic. And then, have a conversation with a mentor because I think that that process helps the mentor identify potential connections between what the student's interested in the field of biology in general. So that's my advice on that.
Yeah, many of the students who come in to work with me, and not just undergraduates, don't know what, sorry, not just high school students, but undergraduates and graduate students too don't know what they're going to do at the beginning. That's very normal. And a nice way to get a sense of broad interests, and this is just a fun thing to do in general, is to get the latest copies of top general purpose science journals like Nature or Science, and just read the abstracts for each paper. The title is often something crazy, but the abstracts, if they're well written, will say something like, we did a study on this kind of cancer and discovered this. And sometimes you won't be able to understand, but over time you understand things. And that gives you a panoramic view of what's fashionable and what people think is important and where the action is in a wide variety of scientific fields. And you can focus on biology, but I like reading it because I like reading about what's happening in solid state physics, which is a subject I know almost nothing about, but it's kind of fun to see what are people figuring out about how to make better superconductors and this kind of thing. So.
那其实对于我的学生也来说也是一样的哈。很多学生其实来到我们科研项目之前呢，都不太清楚自己具体想做什么样的一些科研的项目。那其实呢，一个是你可以在这个你也有一点感兴趣的这个项目当中呢，你去首先学一些这方面的知识，看一看有没有哪个部分是你比较愿意去深入了解的。还有就是，其实就是跟你的导师进行一个比较深入的这样一个交谈。来让他也跟你提供一些建议。那在这个过程当中，他有一些什么样的这个研究的项目你是比较感兴趣的？Okay, thank you so much for sharing your invaluable perspectives and advice with our audience today. I'm confident that everyone has gained a deeper understanding of the research projects, and I truly believe we're set for another successful year on the research projects in 2025. 那也非常感谢今天大家的观看与参与。如果您有任何的问题，都可以添加我们在美教育的小助手，我们非常乐意为您解答。同时，希望您继续关注在美教育的第4届本科规划嘉年华下一场的直播，会在5分钟后进行，期待您的持续支持。Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.